Hello and welcome to this TCA webinar. My name is Frédéric Moera. I'm chair of the Sustainability Working Group within the Trusted Connectivity Alliance, and we are here in order to tell you more about how the SIM industry can support mobile operators' green credentials. You will see that a Q&A session will take place at the end of this session. Questions which were recorded when you signed up to this webinar were passed on to me, so we'll address these questions. In case we do not have the time to address these questions, or unless these questions are extremely specific, we will get back to you in an email after the presentation. Let's have a look at the Trusted Connectivity Alliance and tell you a little bit more about who we are. So, the Trusted Connectivity Alliance is a global industry association working to enable trust in a connected future. The vision that the group shares is to drive sustainable growth of a connected society through trusted connectivity. The Trusted Connectivity Alliance is an evolution of the previous SIM Alliance, so that evolution took place in 2020, as it reflects the continued expansion of the SIM industry and the need for further collaboration across that industry. The Trusted Connectivity Alliance include leading providers of security connectivity solutions for consumer, for IoT, and for M2M devices. This span tamper-resistant elements, going from traditional SIMs, eSIM, integrated SIM, embedded secure element, integrated secure element, as well as hardware and software provisioning and other personalization services. The Trusted Connectivity Alliance is structured into different working groups to identify, to define, and to provide technological, strategic, and marketing elements to their members in order to benefit from the most stringent, secure connectivity solutions. The Sustainability Working Group, created last year, is part of the working groups among the TCA. We look at the drive for sustainable connectivity with one point, which is the mobile and connectivity sector is a breakthrough industry. So if you remember the Paris agreements, about 196 countries signed up to an agreement with the United Nations in order to cap the CO2 emissions to 1.5 degrees from pre-industrial levels to the end of the century. The mobile and connectivity sector has been one of the first to adopt the Sustainable Development Goals from the United Nations and has been classified as United Nations Climate Champion. Still, the fact remains, telecommunications is an energy-intensive industry. We step back a little bit, have a little look at the ICT sector, so information and communication technology sector. This sector, the ICT sector, accounts for about 4% of the global CO2 emissions worldwide. When we look specifically at mobile operators, we see that that share is about 1.6%. So there is a responsibility of the mobile sector around CO2 emissions. Let's have a specific look at mobile devices. Mobile devices are in fact accounted for in the CO2 emissions of the connectivity sector. We take a famous device, an iPhone for instance. According to the constructor data, about just under 80% of, just under 80 kilograms of CO2 is generated throughout the life cycle of the device itself. Now, 80% of these 79 kilogram CO2 equivalent are generated only during the manufacturing process. So there are things that can be done and that need to be done across, again, the ICT sector and specifically on the mobile sector in order to improve typically these manufacturing steps. We look at actions that need to take place across all segments in order to reach the 1.5 degree, actions that need to be coordinated, actions that call for emergency, because the actions need to take place now in order to correct the trajectory. And we look at three different options. One, which is related to the energy. How can we be more energy savvy? How can we try to limit the use or the consumption of energy across the mobile sector? The second aspect, which is linked to the change to more sustainable, typically in that case, to more sustainable energy sources. How can we benefit from renewable energy, typically? That's the second option. Third option is around education. We have a responsibility to educate end users, mobile subscribers, into moving to more sustainable practices while they're using our products, their products. When we look at it from a general perspective, first of all, how are mobile operators setting climate targets? We have a look at the greenhouse gas protocol. The greenhouse gas protocol has defined three main scopes. Okay, so I will detail shortly scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3, but before I talk about these specific scopes, we also need to link the discussion around greenhouse gas emissions to the Science-Based Target Initiative, because the Science-Based Target Initiative is based on the GHG protocol. Coming to these scopes, the GHG protocol defines three different scopes: scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. Scope 1 and scope 2, we generally consider that the actions that are taken by any company, in our specific case, mobile operators, but when the assessment is made by any company, we consider that scope 1 and scope 2 can be directly activated and actions can be directly triggered by the company itself in order to reduce the CO2 emissions linked to that scope. I'll take one concrete example. Company fleet of vehicles. This is a decision that can be made by the company itself if they want to reduce the amount of vehicles used by the company, and the benefit of reducing that amount will directly account in the scope 1 emissions. So generally, it is easier to steer when we talk and to make decisions to reduce the CO2 emissions across scope 1 and scope 2. Scope 3, however, focuses on the supply chain, the value chain, upstream or downstream. To make it simple, your vendors, your suppliers, have a direct impact on your own CO2 footprint. You use their products, so the CO2 impact of their own products are accounted for in your own CO2 impact. Okay. On this scope 3, as you can understand, because it depends on the supply chain actions, it is not as easy to steer and to influence it, to push it, to move to better standards. Okay, so that scope 3 is the key for a change, but that scope 3 is the hardest to tackle. We look at the GSMA data, 62 operators, so representing 61% of the industry by revenue and 46% by connections, have committed to the Science-Based Targets Initiative, so intended to reduce the direct and indirect carbon emissions by 2030. So the path is already defined for these mobile operators. I was telling you that scope 3 is the hardest probably the hardest thing to change. First of all, a roadmap needs to be defined, obviously, by mobile operators in order to define the specific actions around Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3. Keeping in mind that as far as mobile operators are concerned, the Scope 3 emissions, according to GSMA, can contribute up to approximately 70% of an operator's total greenhouse gas emissions. So it is here that most of the efforts rely, and this is where the gain should be, okay? So as a result, operators are closely examining the options that are left by supply chains in order to lead to reduced CO2 emissions. A point on GSMA and the Carbon Trust. So the GSMA and Carbon Trust have worked in order to provide guidelines for mobile operators to define their own approach to reduce the emissions. 3 steps that are mentioned here on your slide. So assess the emission hotspots, identify the emissions reduction opportunities, and develop a comprehensive implementation plan. So as I mentioned earlier, the industry has structured the path to CO2 reduction, the path to net zero for mobile operators to implement. As TCA Group, we also have structured our support to mobile operators in order to contribute to that Scope 3 CO2 emissions reduction. And we get to that point, which is how can the SIM industry improve its environmental credentials for the benefit of the connectivity industry. I'll be covering 5 different initiatives that have been taken and have been put in place by our members in order to support CO2 reduction targets of mobile operators. Starting with the first one, which is the reduction of plastic and material waste. Let's consider one thing. Historically, SIM cards have used credit card plastic supports in order to carry the logistics of the SIMs from the manufacturing of the card all the way to the supply to the end user. Now, evolutions have happened across the years, okay, and we do not depend on the credit card format. Credit card size belongs to the banking segment. As far as the connectivity segment is concerned, we have options that are available in terms of formats, form factors, to reduce the amount of plastic used in order to carry the SIM plug all through the supply chain, all through the logistical channels. There is another way to increase the benefit of or the opportunities around the CO2 reduction with the card size, which is linked to the material that is used to produce these cards. So options have emerged recently promoting the use of recycled plastic, either post-industrial or post-consumer, which in fact avoids the production of new virgin plastic. The plastic which is used to produce these new generation of cards comes from recycled sources, and therefore avoiding again the generation of new virgin plastic. These 2 elements can be combined. You can reduce the card size, while adopting a new plastic type for your SIM. That was the first one on plastic and material waste reduction. The second one tackles packaging and packing. Before we start on the arguments on that slide, let me just clarify a bit of definition of packaging and packing. Packaging is usually what we consider as promotional kits that are used by mobile operators to convey their brand image, to convey their messages to the end users, to also be visible at point of sales. Packing is usually focusing on the logistical elements that are needed to take the SIMs from usually the production facility to the warehouse of the mobile operator. So packing does not include packaging elements, or not necessarily. Now, there are opportunities that exist to switch to greener packaging and to greener packing. When we look at options around packaging, the options cover the use of sustainable raw materials or materials, alternative materials that are, for instance, sourced in a sustainable way. Paper from sustainably managed forests, for instance, is one of them. The use of craft can also be another one. The reduction of the use of inks and varnishes and glue. This is typically a work of eco-design and simplification of the product design in order to avoid using resources around the packaging. Still carrying, of course, the visibility of the brand. Let's add also one point, which is that for a mobile operator transitioning from a traditional SIM card to environmentally friendly SIMs, the packaging also adds more communication boost to the initiative. Okay, so it's also something that can be cumulated with the use of eco-friendly SIM cards. This is for packaging. For packing, we also look at options to reduce the use of plastic. Options have emerged, suggesting, for instance, the replacement of sealing tapes on boxes, replacing them for paper tape, or replacing plastic wrapping around the pallet with cardboard walls. Okay, so elements are available and can be provided by our members to reduce that amount of plastic again around packaging. So that was the second one around switching to greener packaging and packing. We look, of course, at the logistics from one point to another. Greener transportation methods. We suggest that mobile operators also consider the options that are linked to the shipment of their goods, their SIMs, their packaged SIMs, from the production premises, from the production plant, to their own warehouse. We have seen in the past that one of the main hurdles transitioning typically from air freight to sea freight was linked to lead times. We know that some mobile operators like to operate on shorter lead times for delivery. Okay. However, what we have also seen, and that's an element that emerged during the COVID crisis and the fact that supply chains had to adapt around material shortage, is the fact that an anticipated forecast can actually cover the long lead times of international shipments. So there are opportunities here as well to save on CO2 emissions. We'll take quantified elements provided by IDEMIA related to this greener transportation methods, taking from one point of shipment to a point of delivery, comparing the impact for that same journey, for that same route, in using air freight and using sea freight, you can consider about 30% of CO2 savings moving from one to another one. Okay, so it's a substantial impact that can also be leveraged on by mobile operators. Another point, of course, is to limit the distance between the suppliers of each raw materials integrated in the SIM and the SIM manufacturing plants. And here, that's an action that is taken by the TCA members in order to look at options to improve the logistical efficiency of their supply chain. Last point is the closest distance between the manufacturing plant and the final customer as well. This also belongs to the TCA member to promote as much as possible to support CO2 reductions for mobile operators. So to promote a sensitive or sensible, shall I say, a sensible production setup. Okay. So this was for greener transportation methods. We look at transitioning to renewable power sources, so we are getting closer to the manufacturing of these cards. So What is important to consider is, as I mentioned in the introduction, the fact that out of the different options that are left for the connectivity sector to move to more environmental practices, one of them is to reconsider the mix, the energy mix, and the energy options that are used to produce the SIM. Indeed, when we talk about life cycle assessments, when we quantify the environmental impact of a product, of a SIM, of a service, the energy mix that is used in the production, during the production of the SIM cards in our example, has a direct impact on the environmental credentials of the final product that we deliver to mobile operators. So it makes sense that SIM suppliers consider the source of electricity that is used to produce these products. The members of the Sustainability Working Group have taken actions in order to boost, to support the use of more environmentally friendly energy solutions. Okay, so the second point is indeed consider how energy efficient facilities are and how much the own manufacturing ecosystem relies on renewable and low carbon energy. On our side, on the side of the TCA members, we operate this transition for the production of mobile operators' products. We have a look at this point which is very important to me, which is the promotion of more sustainable end-of-life management. It is key, it is extremely important that when a product is defined, it considers the end-of-life management of its own composition. It makes sense that when we define products, we look at how we enable end users to recycle, to reduce, was already mentioned, but to recycle efficiently. How can we facilitate the end of life of our products? How can we also educate consumers and organizations in that sense? What we're looking at is basically looking at options to promote sustainable end-of-life management. Regulations are also pushing, in fact, towards that objective to limit or to facilitate the end of life, the recycling of such products. I'll take one example, which is the WEEE directive here in Europe. The waste of electric and electronic waste of electronic equipment, waste of electric and electronic equipment. This is a European directive which covers indeed all European members, okay, where, if I make it simple, any electric or electronic waste has its own extended producer responsibility scheme, which means that you can return it as an end user, you can return it to where you purchased it, and it will be recycled in an appropriate way. Now, the WEEE directive has been deployed differently across the European continent. Okay, so the regulations are not necessarily aligned across the continent, but things are happening in that sense, and it is important that people keep in mind that regulations also play a part, in fact, in the move to more sustainability. We take a point, so these are the steps that I wanted to illustrate, the different steps that I wanted to tell you more about. Supporting mobile operators, CO2 ambitions, again related to Scope 3. We have other ambitions when we talk about the Trusted Connectivity Alliance Sustainability Working Group. I would like to share with you two of them. One of them, which is the monitoring of the sustainable development and sustainable migration. We believe that the mobile industry will be accelerating the transition from standard from standard products to eco-friendly products. In that context, we have decided to integrate a monitoring of the sustainable transition across the connectivity sector. That's one of the first points. The second point is also a study that we have initiated within the group. We understand that life cycle assessments, as I mentioned, life cycle assessments are used to measure the environmental impact of a product or service. Okay, we understand that in order to provide more, not transparency, but more understanding of the claims, environmental claims that the members make, we understand that it's important for the group and for the working group members to come together and to work on a common methodology in order for us to be able to rely on that same methodology when we claim our environmental footprint, the environmental footprint of our products. Again, the idea here is to provide better understanding and to limit the doubts and questions around the green claims that can be made by our members. So two priorities that will be rolled out across 2024, okay, which I don't doubt you will be hearing about next year. I'm getting to the point of the questions and answer. I hope the points that were developed during this webinar were clear. Do not hesitate, obviously, to reach out to us. You've got here on this slide the contacts in order to contact us. Yes, to get in touch with us. Feel free to address your questions, obviously. That is extremely important for us, of course, to mature our next steps, okay? So we look at the Q&A. I've got the questions here. First question, which was raised in the Q&A, which is, are there SIM recycling initiatives? And if so, whom and where? When we talk about SIM recycling, we will have to be careful about what we include in SIM. Are we talking about the SIM card body or the SIM plug? Depending on what we talk about, the answer will be different, obviously. When we talk about SIM card bodies, I can confirm that some of our members have taken actions in order to promote the recycling of their own products, okay? So alternative materials, we've covered the recycled part, but it goes and it extends beyond the use of recycled materials and the SIM recycling aspect, as far as card bodies are concerned, is also covered by our members, okay? So feel free to reach out to the contacts that you have with our members, company members, in order to get more information specifically on the options for card body recycling. When we talk about the SIM plug, I made a mention during the webcast. I made a mention to the WE directive. So I take again the example of Europe. Are there SIM recycling initiatives? Normally, wherever the SIM card is integrated in the WE directive, the SIM recycling is supposed to take place. There is supposed to be an extended producer responsibility scheme integrating the SIM being recognized in these specific countries as electronical waste, okay? So there are things that happen that are country specific. So if there are specific countries, again, where you operate, which you would like to know more about, of course, feel free to contact us, and we'll get back to you on the specific case. The second question covers the regulations. How do EU regulations resulting from the Green Deal, like circular economy or energy efficiency, impact these actions? Let's consider a pyramid. Have in mind a pyramid. Everything starts from the United Nations. The United Nations will suggest, more than suggest, or will agree on a main path to reach a global CO2 reduction. Here we're talking about the 1.5 degree, so the CO2 reduction needed to reach the 1.5 degree max impact by the end of the century, okay? So these are decisions that are made by the United Nations. Aligned with and down the pyramid are basically the countries, okay? So in order to answer the requirements and the agreement from the United Nations, the countries worldwide will be expected to make decisions in order for the economic actors, public or private, to take. Okay, Europe is one of the leading. Europe is one of the leading continents talking about sustainability. A lot of rules you've mentioned in your question about the Green Deal, and in fact, the Green Deal is one of the steps that was promoted in order to push the countries to accelerate towards the net zero. Net zero is also something that the European Commission is trying to push, okay, across the members. So two programs, Fit for 55, okay, and a net zero ambition by 2040. To reach these ambitions, we have to change what happens on what economic actors do, okay? The European Green Deal has always revolved around the three first notions: reuse, reduce, recycle. Any opportunity to reuse, reduce, recycle integrates the general methodology that is created around the Green Deal, okay? In that sense, the different examples that I've given you during the webcast illustrate that we integrate, in fact, the recommendations given by the Green Deal. But we can expect that more things will happen. You know that regulations have changed, and across the last 5 years, I can tell you that a lot of things have happened, a lot of things will happen. Keep in mind, for instance, the discussions that are happening, two main events that are happening at the moment as we speak. First one, which is the plastic treaty, which looks at reducing the impact of plastic pollution. So here we're looking at CO2, but we're mostly looking at plastic reduction, okay? So happening now, a text expected in 2024. And yes, and of course, the second one, which will happen in the coming weeks, which is the COP28, where we again need to expect bold moves and bold decisions from the regulators in order to reach the Paris Agreement trajectory. Okay. That was it for the questions that were raised. In the sign-up chat. You will receive at the end of this session. You will be prompted to provide your feedback on this webcast, as well as submit any question to the group. These questions will again be taken by the Sustainability Working Group, and we will get back to you. We will get back to you in a timely manner, obviously. I hope you've enjoyed this webcast. Again, feel free to get back to the Trusted Connectivity Alliance members to know more about the sustainability around the SIM cards. And for now, I wish you a nice rest of the day. Thank you.